Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Connect for Health, the live webinar and podcast series brought to you by Cigna Healthcare Middle East and Africa, with a little bit of help from Mental, as always. I'm Scott Armstrong, the founder of Mental. Today, I may be joined by my co-host, Alison Sharp from Cigna Healthcare. She's having a few technical difficulties, so you might be just stuck with me, but I like to talk, so you're all good. Many people are beginning to experience a kind of different psychological phase. It's sort of less shock, less adrenaline in the moment, but more sustained stress, jumpiness, distraction. And I don't know about you, but I am definitely feeling the emotional drain as the events drag on. A reminder to all of you joining us live today, if you are a Cigna Healthcare member, you can take part in our polls and submit questions. Also, brilliantly, this session is again open to the wider community. So you, if you're live with us today, can also get involved. Submit your questions in the Q&A and we'll try and get our guest to give some advice and some answers to those. If you are watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast channels, then you won't be obviously be able to take part in the live interactivity, but please reach out to Cigna Healthcare for details of membership if you really want to be part of it. So today we are joined by Dr. Jane Halsall, who is a Dubai-based clinical psychologist with more than 20 years of experience. Dr. Jane, welcome to Connect for Health. So we're here, it's 3 weeks in. Before we sort of get to tools and all that kind of thing that people can use to kind of regulate their nervous systems, just tell us, what are you seeing? Like, give us a quick map of what you're noticing right now in the community.
Well, I think within the community, there's been a real shift. So, obviously, initially, when everything started to happen, people went into a real sort of heightened state of alert. And with the cortisol levels increasing, stress levels increasing, people were very much heightened into a place of survival. So it's almost like an action stage initially. People will often get quite a lot of things done. But the thing is, we're now in week 4. And as a
Mm.
result, people are struggling with emotional fatigue. So we can't sustain those levels of heightened alert. And as a result, people are tired, people are struggling emotionally. I'm seeing people struggling in work, so struggling to focus, low motivation. And people aren't able to sustain that level of uncertainty for that long. It's really impacting their bodies.
I think we may have Alison back. Alison, you've had some emotional fatigue this morning trying to get logged in. How are you? Are you there joining us?
Good morning, everybody, from the sickness side. Lovely to have you with us, Elena. Yes, I did have a little bit of emotional fatigue this morning, so I can tell you about my experience. But for more of the people dialing in today, what does emotional fatigue look like in real life, and what are the telltale signs that people can often miss?
Well, in terms of emotional fatigue, that's a really good question because it's a form of psychological exhaustion. So it's almost a state between chronic stress and burnout. And the signs very much like if you're struggling, so in terms of cognition, it might be brain fog, it might be feeling like struggling to make decisions or forgetting things. In terms of emotional signs, it could be irritability. You might find your tolerance levels have decreased with things. And you might find that you've actually got reduced empathy for certain people or certain situations and feeling quite numb to the environment. And behavioral, it might be withdrawal. So you might actually notice that you're isolating more or avoiding tasks and maybe zoning out. But there is consistent tiredness. It's like a physical sense of tiredness, and you might be struggling to sleep and just maintain tasks that you wouldn't have had difficulty with before.
That's super interesting. So you feel like logically you could think, okay, I'm coping with everything. I'm managing to get through my day to day. I'm logically I should be okay. But you're saying these are the signs that you should watch out for, that potentially you're maybe not as okay as you think.
Yes, because your cortisol levels, which is your stress hormone, remain elevated. And the problem is we're then become emotionally fatigued. It's like the body is stuck in a place of hyperarousal. and we can't function in the same way that we could before. So you might feel really tired. The brain uses a huge amount of energy, processing uncertainty and threat, and as a result, the nervous system depletes that. So this is why we have to be mindful of what actually is going on physically and emotionally.
Yeah, we were talking before we started. You were talking because we kind of both experienced this, both ourselves and our families. You were talking about hypervigilance, which apparently I
Yes.
can't say. With people feeling jumpy, sensitive to sounds, you sort of checking the environment and scanning for threats. Talk us through what that actually is, both from a kind of like a psychological perspective, but also how that feels physically. What's actually happening to the body that makes it just something that's really powerful that we're actually experiencing?
Well, hypervigilance is when the nervous system is stuck in a threat detection loop. So it's basically the part of your brain, the amygdala, it's constantly scanning for danger. And as a
Mm.
result, the body stays in a sympathetic state. So, not to get too complicated, but it's when your heart rate will become elevated. You might actually find that you're just very anxious. So, you can find yourself startled with, different noises and responses. So, it's like you're constantly alert for danger, and your attention is very much um heightened or like drawn towards threat. So that's why with hyper it's very much about adapting to situations where you might feel under threat or in danger, if that
So
makes.
I'm going to bring in our first audience question, actually, because it's the marvelous Sabrina Ben Salmi, who is an old friend, particularly of mentors. Sabrina, thanks for getting involved today. But she's actually asking as well while we're on this. So let's just talk about this. So we're in this kind of hypervigilant state, and I know that this is something as I was saying before. My wife has really struggled with this, where to the point where she just literally could not turn off her nervous system. Anything, whether it be a car door slamming, one of those boy races revving his Mustang engine, anything would just startle her. Sabrina's asked the question: what are some of the effective ways to calm our nervous system? Whether it's practical strategies, breathing techniques. What are the things? What are the tools that you're trying to equip the people that come to you for help, Dr. Jane?
No, I think that's a really good question that she's asked, and I think it's really important at the moment that we do try and remain calm because it is about regulating our body. So it's trying to stay present in the moment. I think the practical tips is being mindful of what news exposure that you're having. So
Mhm.
be very mindful of like if you're constantly scrolling, if you're watching news, because that's going to keep you in a heightened state of alert. So also breathing techniques. So it's being able to maybe just put your feet on the ground, ground yourself in the moment, and do you can inhale and have a long exhale. And if you repeat your breath cycle like that, that again starts to regulate your nervous system. Movement is a really good thing. So obviously, if you can get outside, I obviously understand that for hypervigilant people, being outside could be a trigger. But if you can just in some way go for a walk or find or just movement within the house, that's also a very useful tool to again try and regulate your sympathetic nervous system back and reduce your cortisol levels. So it's breathing, it's grounding techniques. It might be journaling, it's movement, it's making also sure that you actually sleep. So I think it's trying to also self-care and regulating just your sleep, your eat meal times, all these things. So it's almost like all these things are actually just to ground yourself.
Alison, can I tag you in here? Because I mean, I think one of the things that we are kind of open talking about was that idea that we've gone from the adrenaline of the first few days, which are like, oh my word, what's happening, to now this kind of just steady drumbeat. How are you? I mean, how are you coping it? How are you seeing things unfold? Because I must admit, I'm all as someone who is a mental health advocate. mine feels pretty frayed at the minute. I do struggle with this kind of this concept of emotional fatigue because it just never seems to end.
I think a lot of what Dr. Jane has said already very much resonates with me. My logical brain kicks in all the time of what needs to be done, task in hand. A lot of the symptoms that you said, Dr. Jane, do feel they do resonate a lot, actually. Yeah. And one of the things that I've maybe struggled a little bit with is in the beginning, I was watching way too much of the news, and that was stopping me falling asleep at night. And then I kind of, I don't want to watch it anymore. But then I find that that's the opposite. You've kind of gone from one extreme of watching too much to then none. And there needs to be somewhere in the middle of the balance. So how do you balance that, Dr. Jane, of, staying informed and keeping aware of what's happening around you, but not falling into that hypervigilance state that you mentioned and staying there?
I think that's a really good question because actually, I think we're all guilty of that. We all consume too much, and then it's putting boundaries in place. So it might be able to, instead of maybe, because what you're talking about there is one extreme to the other. So it's either having, full on consumption in some way, and then actually going to like, I don't actually want to hear anything. So I think it's about finding that balance. And I think this is the key with everything. It's about, okay, I can allow myself to access this information, but I have to make sure that I don't spend more than 5 minutes. I have, you know, I might make sure that I'm actually watching things that are accurate information. So there's a lot of false information out there, a lot of AI. So making sure whichever, sources are verified and things like that. But I wouldn't be spending more than 3 minutes or something, a day looking at the news, really keep it and don't do it first thing in the morning and don't do it late at night. So find a point in the day where actually I can just check in. But I think for me, it's about balance. So it's trying to not
Mhm.
go from one extreme to the other. It's just allow yourself some time to access it, but not enough that actually it gets you activated again. Because it's all about keeping ourselves regulated at this point.
Is
So
there a degree of media literacy that we can kind of embrace in a way here as well? Because, and I speak as someone who was a journalist for many years before I started mental for very personal reasons. But yeah, w- we can see people like it's difficult for us enough at the best of times. Before this situation happened, many people were spending far too long on their screens and being exposed to clickbait headlines. Now we seem to be locked in this phase where we have a media and a social media which are basically leaning into making profit from panic. And they're deliberately leading people they're deliberately triggering people's nervous systems. So I found what you said there really resonating about where are you getting your information from? Because I know, and again, my wife, Christina, was very much like she'd be on all these different social media groups and in all these different WhatsApp groups, and she'd be showing this, putting, one video in my face that someone had shared and be like, it's fake. That's AI. I know because I was journalist. I know that that's a fake news channel that has literally been set up to trigger you. So that idea of a kind of information literacy, how you access that information, how important is that for people just to take that step back, even if it's like you say, it's like it's an interesting thing because we've got a screen. We can actually see how much time we're spending on our screens and how much time we're spending on different platforms on our iPhones or on our Androids. Maybe that's a useful tool for people to track where are they spending their time and then maybe going, yeah, maybe I should be doing something else.
I think it's hugely important because we have to reduce the emotional input of new screen time. I think it's like you said, false websites are being set up. There is a lot of AI out there. There's a lot of stuff that helps catastrophize. So then that, heightens our anxiety and it keeps us in a state of panic and high alert. So, if we step away from that, then we've got a better chance of regulating ourselves. So I think it is just be very mindful. That's all I would say to people about what sources you're looking at and how reliable they are and the amount of time that you're actually spending on it.
Got some great questions coming in. I'm going to ask one, and then I'm going to bring the first poll of the day in, and then I'm sure Alison's jumping to get into this as well. But I wanted to just pose this question from Cressida. I hope I've got your name right there, Cressida Velez. She says, "I thought I managed myself well under the circumstances that we were in for 3 weeks." She's in Qatar, but recently I find it hard to sleep. It seemed like I was subconsciously looking for the explosion. And now that there isn't any for the last 5 days, thanks God, I'm really finding it hard to sleep. How do we handle that? And I find that fascinating because, yeah, I very much coped with, or felt I coped with the bangs and the adrenaline and the change of the situation. But then as soon as it was calming down, I almost felt more scared, or not, I suppose scared is the wrong word, but more activated by that. Is it over? And can I actually trust this? And I saw my wife go this, because we had those headlines saying that things might be improving, and then they didn't. And again, we've got the news coming in going, oh, it might be improving. So you allowing yourself to take a breath and go, oh, is this going to be okay now? And then bang, it's not. So that's a really interesting place to be in.
It is, and I think most people can relate to this question because it is. We're thinking, okay, we're coping very well, but then actually what we've got to acknowledge here is how tired and the toll on our body and our systems. Because after 4 weeks, we're exhausted. So, like you said, it's we then find that sleep becomes difficult, and we've got to be able to manage that. So in terms of sleeping, you know, first off, don't try and force sleep because then actually, it creates more anxiety. I think it's just about being able to have a time that you regulate, try and actually just find ways to help yourself sleep. So it might be having like relaxation time, no screen time before bed. It's just, you might find journaling's helpful, all of these things, and just trying to wake up at the same time and go to bed at the same time. But just acknowledge there's nothing, this is a normal response. After 4 weeks, our bodies are physically exhausted from, you know, being on that high alert, almost the expectation, like you said, that something's going to happen in the night, that we might have an alarm go off, that we might need to move or we might need to do something. So it is, I think it's a really good question, but we have to focus on, right, what can I can control in the moment as opposed to what can I not control? And how do I just try and maintain some sense of regulation and deactivate my nervous system as much as I can?
First poll of the day. We've got a very engaged audience today, so I want you to get involved and jump on the vote. Yeah, let us know. Okay, so this is kind of like week 3, week 4. Over this past week, what has affected you most? A, sleep disruption or waking often. Definitely guilty of that one for me. Feeling jumpy at sudden sounds. Definitely my wife. Difficulty focusing in work, only because I was up since 3 o'clock and haven't had my coffee yet. Irritability or low patience, my wife all of the time. Emotional numbness or feeling detached. Constant news checking and rumination, or physical symptoms, headaches, tight chest, stomach issues. Out of that list, Dr. Jane, what do you think, or what have you seen the most that people have been affected by most? So please let us know what's been affecting you over the past week.
I actually, with clients at the moment, I think all of these are really common, to be honest.
Mhm.
I think the one,
I'm going to pin you down. I'm going to pin you down. I want you to pick two
okay,
top ones.
well, I would say, you know what, the difficulty focusing at work actually is a
Mhm.
very common one. And I think the reality is because a lot of people underestimate what this emotional fatigue does and how actually just, you know, people saying, "Oh, I'm struggling to actually feel motivated. I can't get work done." And the thing is, I think they have the expectation that they should still be operating at the same way that they were maybe at the start of this, and it's unrealistic. So I think people need to be kinder to themselves, and especially if you're in a position of management with
Mm.
employees and things. I think and for yourself as a leader, I think it's very hard to to manage, but it is actually, recognize that this is, oh, okay, so yes, so that came up. So difficulty focusing at work is a common one.
Yeah.
Sleep disruption, so waking often. Yes. So it's understanding.
Was that just you voting over and over again there? No, you've absolutely killed it there, nailed it. Difficulty focusing at work.
Yeah.
I do want to actually focus on that a little later in the conversation.
Yeah.
Alice said, you know me, I always tend to hog the mic. I'm sure there's questions that you want to jump in with as well.
Just a comment from me first. Dr. Jane, just you saying there that how you're feeling is normal. Just hearing that from you is helpful. Yeah, I think for me in the beginning there was all these noises and there was all this stuff happening that it did take its toll. But now things are a little bit calmer, but you're still not feeling quite yourself. So I think hearing you say, "Look, there's nothing wrong with you. It's completely normal. You're just tired of the situation, and everything is obviously having a drain on you." So I think just hearing that actually it's to be expected is really helpful. You do have some people that can get a little bit embarrassed about the unpredictability. What can you say to somebody who's trying to stop them fighting that feeling and start regulating it? Because you do get that where some people kind of almost apologize for having certain reactions and expressing that they've got some of these symptoms and they feel a bit embarrassed about it, which they shouldn't. So how would you manage a conversation with someone in that circumstance?
Well, I think that's also a really good question, because what I have noticed as well, there's quite a lot of judgment. There's a lot of judgment about how you should respond to things, how you should behave, or even should you stay in the UAE, should you leave? There's so much attached to what decisions people are making or how they're responding to things. And I think it's about kindness. I think it's about being compassionate and just being mindful of, how, it's so in regards to your question, it's yeah, just sorry, I've got myself lost there. It's just happening again. What the
Maybe I can guide you back as well, because what you were both saying there was really resonating with me, because uh, what I found fascinating was that particularly in those early days, like I was saying, I was like, oh well, I logically knew I was safe. I physically knew I was safe, and I knew that my nervous system wasn't reacted. And I was very much in kind of coping mode. I was there for my daughter, just to make sure that she felt safe. I'm trying to reassure my wife, and my wife's reaction was very, very different. As I say, her nervous system was completely on. She was really struggling, and it did take me, to do a bit of a check, to check myself, to go, have compassion here, because it's not just snap yourself out of this. This is actually, you can see very, very quickly that some people would deal with it in one way, but then other people were dealing with it or not dealing with it other ways. And all of us are going to be experiencing this through different lenses. Like one of our audience members there saying, actually, we did have an audience member on earlier. Mirella posted that she understands PTSD and hearing bombs and sniper shots because she survived the war in Bosnia, but she's still, even having had that past experience, she's still startled by any noise, to the point where she asked her husband to refrain from walking up behind me and speaking suddenly, because she would jump out of her skin. And I remember one morning we were in, we've got the community gardeners, and all of a sudden there is a massive sound, and it's a hedge trimmer. It's not a drone, it's a hedge trimmer. But again, so that need to have compassion, because everyone's going to experience this in a kind of different way. I have a past lens. I have a past experience with trauma. My nervous system works in different ways. Doesn't mean it's the right way, and doesn't mean I'm healthy, which will also bring me on to a question from another audience member. But that absolute need of compassion, because it- everyone's going to be experiencing this differently.
Well, also, in going back to her question, sorry, got distracted, but the shame side of things. So there is no shame And that's the whole point. It's like your individual response is all shaped by your lived experience. So, someone like you just said, if someone has had an experience or had PTSD because they've actually lived or come from a war zone or a conflict area, then they're going to be extremely heightened to this. So no one, so whenever someone goes on, their nervous system is going to be wired to like actually respond in a very different way. So I think we have to be very mindful so that there should be no shame. If someone is
Mm.
struggling, I think we have to normalize it and accept that, and also just respect that other people have different coping strategies. There's not one way that's right or wrong here. So just be mindful that everyone deals with it in their own way.
Before I bring you back in, Alison, I promise I will. Just wanted it was a really nice question from Anuj. She was asking, what's the difference between healthy coping or emotional suppression? How do people know if they're being strong or just shutting down emotionally? Are distractions at work, scrolling, staying busy helpful, or can they worsen emotional fatigue? What are the small signs that someone is reaching their emotional limit? Not just one question, about five there. But yeah, I love that question about the difference between healthy coping and being strong, as opposed to actually just burying things.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So, people have different responses. So it's also normal to numb out as well because the nervous system can protect you from overload. So healthy coping strategies is being able just to keep yourself regulated. So it's exercise, it's maintaining routine where you can, it's eating well, it's connecting with people. All of these things are normal coping strategies and responses, but also people can feel numb. So it's being mindful that, our body can respond in different ways, but it again, it's whatever you need in order to survive at the moment, and both of those, it's just being able to acknowledge my feelings is normalizing how your feelings and taking control where you can.
Mental, we always talk about we're trying to tackle the stigma of mental health. With this, there should be no stigma because nobody really should be living in a war zone. I mean, this is again that whole you were talking about the fact that this is if people are struggling, that's an entirely understandable and actually probably an entirely natural response to what's happening to them. Alison, and I always love your insights. So I want to bring you back in again.
More of so I loved Anuja's question on the what's the balance between being trying to be emotionally resilient versus suppressing emotions. I want to ask more of a personal question, if that's okay, Doctor. Of a part of what I'm hearing in the Middle East of the impacted countries, many people are worried also about what this could mean for their future here, what it could mean for their role. So there is this pressure that you'll still continue to perform at work. So it's that balance of, okay, I'm emotionally fatigued, but I still want to perform at work. And it's how do you kind of almost switch on to, right, okay, I now need to be in work mode. I might have kids doing homeschooling. What would be your like kind of practical tips of how do you try and increase that focus while you're in work?
Again, this is a really good question. So it's like practical tips to keep focus. The thing is, so many people are emotionally fatigued at the moment. And have low psychological energy. So we're working on depleted systems. So again, it's about being realistic and kind to yourself. So it's just actually, like you said, a lot of people are anxious about their future. Businesses are changing. Jobs might not exist anymore after this, sadly. So it's like when we're operating from that place with that uncertainty, it is about, right, what can I control where versus what can I not control at the moment? And it might just actually be instead of saying I need to do everything right now, let me just focus on the small tasks. So, right, I need to actually just reply to one email today. I need to just even check my emails. I might just have to complete small tasks. So it's trying not to overwhelm yourself with and feel overloaded. And I think that is the key. It's about managing expectations, being realistic with what you can do, and focus on what you can control, because obviously none of us really have an idea of how long this is going to last. And we have to exist. We have to have some sense of normality. I'm a parent. I've got a child in, trying to manage homeschooling. It's really difficult. So it's, if you're trying to work and you're trying to balance that, just let's not try and be perfect. Okay, let's just do what we can do and recognize that that's enough. Okay, and that you just be kind to yourself. I think that's the key message that I really want to convey here is just, you know, just do what you can do.
Because it does add in an extra layer of stress, doesn't it? Because, like you want to be productive and you want to perform well, but then in the background, you've still got, as you say, homeschooling. Yeah, I've got a 10-year-old girl who can go bounding in at any minute. Often people may have dogs or pets. They're also barking in the distance. And so you just kind of stress because you're almost looking at two things. You're trying to control what's happening in the background and almost stop it from bleeding into the professional life. And actually it's all happening at the same time. Um, with all that being on, with this being stretched in so many different directions, um, and let alone the distractions of the noise or the house shaking or the headlines, what can leaders do? Because I'm a big advocate that leaders can really, really help in this situation. But what can they do that's helpful and not performative? What does supportive look like during a period of sustained uncertainty?
I think it's really important for anyone that's listening who might be in a leadership role is to support their staff right now. Listen to what they're saying, because each person, as we've already said, has a different lived experience. So some people might be coping better than others, and some, emotional fatigue or burnout is not necessarily that visible as well. So really be mindful of what you're looking out for. I think communication, so clear communication is really important, but also managing expectations of your workforce. So just be mindful of actually what am I asking them to achieve, and validate their experience. I think that's really important. It's like acknowledge, okay, it's okay. I recognize that you're struggling right now. So, let's not add and magnify their stress. Let's be supportive.
If I flip it a little, what
Mm.
can they actually do for themselves? You talked earlier about compassion and kind of self-kindness. How important is that for leaders to actually also practice that self-care? Again, I always come back to that fit your own oxygen mask first. And I feel I'm now entering this phase where I spent the first sort of week, 10 days making sure that my daughter was safe, making sure that the people I was supporting through the work were happy, the making sure that my wife was supported in the way that she needed to be supported. And within all of that, it got to about 14 days and it was like, well, where's the time for me? Where's the impact on me? Kind of coming back to Anuj as well, like what's that difference between coping and not coping? That idea that you need to look after yourself as well, make time. So we've got leaders who will be, responsible for people underneath them, possibly people, the board above them, responsible for profit and loss, responsible for their kids' homeschooling, responsible for supporting their partners through all of this. That's a lot.
If I can
It's
jump in
so
there, Scott, I totally agree with that, and I'm a big advocate for connected listening. So when you lead a team of people and you know that they could be struggling, I'm a big advocate of, well, okay, phones down. I fully focus on what that person's saying. I really try and understand where they're coming from. But when you're doing that with multiple people, as the person who's trying to listen, can be draining. It can be really tiring. You can find yourself exhausted at the end of those conversations. So I just wanted to add that to the question of when you're trying to support, whether it be children or family members or even family members in different places, how do you do that while still looking after yourself?
I want to jump in again. Sorry, Jade, Dr. Jade, purely because I wanted you to answer that for me from a kind of personal perspective as well, because you're absolutely, I mean, Alison's absolutely nailed it for me there. Going, like you're listening to people sharing how they're struggling. That has an impact on you. That's something that you obviously do day in, day out. So what's your kind of survival tips? How do you process? Because you're doing that all the time. That's what you're trained to do and chosen to do. But yeah, so uh, please, yeah, from a personal but also from a professional point of view.
I think, from a professional point of view, I'm hearing this from a lot of people who are in leadership roles. And I think the key thing here is they think that they have to do it all. They feel this sense of responsibility for so many people, and they're navigating that as well as their own personal life. So I think you have to appreciate this is really tough for people. But I think the key word here for me is boundaries. So,
Mm,
recognize that we can't fix other people. We can't necessarily take away. We can put things in place to support people, but actually ultimately we have to support ourselves and we have to create that space. So for me personally in this role and professionally, I just make sure that, I create some time for myself to do either exercising or to do some breath work to stay grounded. And I just create some space. It might only be, I am a working parent, I'm a single parent. It's very tough. So, it's trying to just create some space. It might just be in the car. It might just be, you know, having time just to go, right, okay, I'm just gonna do something, listen to a song I like, or I'm just gonna do something that just helps me ground myself in this moment because or it might just be having a bath at the end of the day before bed. That might be my me time. So I think it's trying to create some space within your day just for you. So just to acknowledge, how am I feeling? What can I control at the moment? What can I not control? Because I think that's so important. And then that triggers a lot of our anxiety. We try to fix others, we try and help, we try to take responsibility. And what I hear a lot is there isn't enough time in the day. You know, I can't actually, there's no time for me, but we have to prioritize that. That is a must.
thank you for sharing that. I love also that the concept that you talk there as well about, you can't necessarily fix people. I could see even, from my wife's experience of this, the early days I was actually trying to give her, or tell her all the solutions that, were often shared. And she basically would tell me to leave her alone. Perhaps not quite as politely as that, if I'm honest with you. So eventually it was right, okay, what do you need? Rather than me trying to, force a solution on you, just try and take a step back and go, right, what do you need in this moment rather than me trying to advise you.
That is such an important question because I think communication is key. It's what asking, what do they need? Like it goes back again to this idea of we're all, what our lived experience is, how we respond to things. Have we had previous trauma? Do we have PTSD? All of these things. So each person's going to respond differently. So, yeah, start with communication and just recognize that actually, if they can share what they need, listen to that. Don't try and assume that we can fix the other, or and also don't carry responsibility necessarily. I know that's really difficult, and especially in some roles. But it's really trying to find that balance and boundaries are the key.
So I'm now going to ask the audience again. I want to find out what you need. It's time for our second poll of the edition, and we're going to be asking you this time, what do you feel would help you most over the next 7 days? Better sleep strategies, tools to calm the nervous system quickly, a plan to reduce news overload, staying focused at work during the uncertainty, supporting children or family, communicating better as a team or family. I definitely had to work on that one, or knowing when to seek extra support for yourself. So let us know. I mean, I think we've kind of covered many of these today. Um, I really also want to. I'm going to be interested to see where this comes out. I'm going to put you on the spot again, Dr. Jane. Where do you think this is going to come out?
I would say most people, it's either tools to calm the nervous system quickly, I think,
Hmm.
or actually in the current climate, the fact that we're in week 4, maybe knowing when to seek extra support might be also.
Interesting. We're going to give you another minute late to answer that question. So keep your votes coming in. Another aspect of this, and I know, Alison, you wanted to talk about this as well, but this whole idea of community and collective anxiety, where the whole community feels the tension. And, you know, I saw my wife, in all these different WhatsApp groups and the social media. And while it seems like a system of support, it also seems to be reinforcing the panic.
Mhm. Yeah, and just before I answer that, I just want to take a
Mm.
second to talk about so some here you're talking about extra support and knowing when to seek extra help. I know that this talk today is open to the public, but for all the Cigna members who have dialed in today, there is a lot of support that is offered through your plan. Please go on to the Cigna website or your app and check what you've got in your benefits. You might have an employee assistance program, which is like counseling that can be done through video call, phone call. You might have a psychiatric benefit, which would allow you to go speak to a specialist and get some guidance. We have a safe travel by Cigna app that you may have access to. There are lots of tools because I understand that this is overwhelming. I think one of the questions when we get the answers to the poll is I'd like to ask Dr. Jane is I think a lot of people are going to say many of these things is what I want to work on. And if you try and tackle them all at once, that can be overwhelming. So how do you, step by step introduce new behaviors without, trying to fix your world at once? Because to me, that would be a lot of people would be overwhelmed and then do nothing. So how do you kind of small practical steps to implement new behaviors to cope with a very new environment that we're in?
Bang
Well, in
on.
terms of
Answer
To
the
calm the
poll.
nervous. Sorry, the polls actually confirmed it as well. Tools to calm the nervous system quickly. Yeah, Dr. Jane, sorry, I interrupted you just as you were about to enlighten us.
That's so great. I mean, this is, I'm not surprised that that one has actually scored the highest. Calming the nervous system. So, again, it's the grounding, it's breathing exercises, it's being mindful of our thoughts. So, it's trying to regulate our nervous system, basically. So, when we are in a place of threat, our amygdala starts, that's gets activated. So, it's trying to actually it's what we call the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's trying to, again, reduce our adrenaline, reduce our cortisol levels, or stress, which is our stress hormone. So it's just, it's grounding ourselves. It's, and also talking to people, because I think this links again into the point that you said about collective anxiety. If we are in groups. So if we're scrolling on the news channel, if we're with in WhatsApp groups where everyone is very heightened and everyone's sort of catastrophizing in that is going to we are wired for connection, but then we pick up other people's emotional states. So we have to be very mindful of what we're exposing ourselves to. So I think that's like a key strategy, is just being mindful of, like, okay, how do I regulate myself here? And who am I talking to? What am I exposing myself to? Practically, physically, manage your sleep, manage your
Mm.
eating, find routine in things, trying to find control in what you can control rather than what you can't in times of uncertainty. And all of these things should hopefully help you try and calm your nervous system quite effectively. Even washing your face
I
in cold water, very stressed, is a very good one.
Again, I'm sorry, turning this into a personal therapy session, as I always do. I'm really, really fascinated about what's happening to us when we've lost this sense of routine. Because I think that's one of the things I miss. I'm actually missing the school run. I'm missing getting to the gym as much. I'm just, yeah, we got to the point where we knew how things worked, and now all of a sudden that's all ripped up. How I think Alison talked about this as well, about establishing a new routine. How do we do that? Because having that routine, like I say, I miss the school run. I miss chatting to my daughter, while we're going to school, rather than the, homeschooling, which is actually a different experience.
Well, I think when we have structure, it enables us to feel safe. So I think it's about a
Mm.
sense of control. We know what we're doing, we know what the day needs to look like. So, in terms of maybe just with the current climate, I think getting up in the morning, making sure that you're not exposing yourself to any news initially. So maybe having conversations, grounding yourself in the morning. That might be when you do your exercises, maybe do some movements. And then I think with the day is go into work, but again, manage your expectations. Don't put a lot of stress on yourself. Just know what your capabilities are, and in terms of just do what you can do. And then, in terms of focusing or motivation, don't be harsh on yourself. And then I think we need to have boundaries in terms of a cutoff as well. So when your working day is over, that has to be a point when you actually can then, go home. Or if you're working from home, it's trying to just do something for yourself at that point. So it's trying to disconnect from feeling like, oh, I have to do this, or, these responsibilities. That could be family time, that's connecting with other people. And then in terms of sleep, I think into your structure, it's make sure you wind down, again, making sure you're not having exposure, to not scrolling or to negative news. And then just making sure that you decompress basically and try and regulate yourself and calm yourself before you can get to sleep, and try and maintain a regular sleep pattern as much as you can. So I
Chris,
think it's creating routine within a day as much as you can within the circumstances.
Christelle's made an interesting comment. You forgot enjoy nice moments and have fun. Well, obviously we didn't forget, Christelle, because we assumed that this counted as a nice moment and that you were indeed having fun. But because I've actually, I've heard people say that they don't feel that they should be going out and having fun in a situation like this. But fun's very important to us.
It is. And I think, again, it's how different people respond. But I think that, Chris, it's a really good point. We have to find pleasure and enjoyment in things, and it might be really small things. It might be a great conversation with someone. It might be connecting with someone. It might be just achieving something, and this is the point. I think we have to, but don't put pressure on yourself about how you should behave at the moment. It's not a case of like, oh, I have to be all negative all the time because that reflects the environment or me in fear. It's, if you can find pleasure in things, good on you, do that. But just be mindful, not everyone operates in the same way. So it's very dependent on you as an individual.
Alison, I remember you were talking on the previous podcast we did around this, and Tatiana's asked the question as well. How can I handle situations when friends who are not living in this region are seeing the news and keep asking, how bad is it really? Because they're caring. Sometimes it might be performative, in a gossip kind of way, but genuinely people are concerned. You talked about that previously as well, I think, in that first podcast we did on this subject.
yeah, and I think the tips that we got in that one were really good. I did adopt some of them. So my parents do want regular updates. So every morning I'll send them a text message, or we're in a WhatsApp group with my sister, both my parents, and I do it. So the advice that was given previously was have a set time where you do a set update, and so they know that they can expect to hear from you then, and that tends to keep everybody calm. So I tend to do that. So first thing in the morning, I'll just, okay, I've slept okay today. Like I'll just give them an update. And then at the end of the day, I would do the same. So that was a really good practical tip. Instead of feeling this, okay, I have to keep everybody informed all the time. The advice was to kind of set a cadence of how often you would do it and who you would do it with. So I find that really helpful from the last session.
Can I also add
Dr.
there
Jane,
as well? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say you've also, I think, with boundaries, so just be mindful of not necessarily, having to do things for other people, because I think a lot of the time then people are like, oh, I think you should be doing this, or I think you should be, especially if they're not in the region, it's like, oh, I think you should be leaving, or you should be, behaving in a certain way or doing something. And I think just you have to operate from a place, only you know what works for you, what your own circumstances are. So I think it's also not being sort of led to do things for other people, just maintain, your own sort of autonomy in terms of what direction you want to take.
Yeah. I try not to keep the conversation just about what's happening. So when I'm kind of having that check-in, I'm also using it as an excuse for me. I live alone. So you're working from home, you're home a lot. So I also use
Mm.
it as a tool to help me in a sense of, I'm talking about other things like what's going on with family members, talking to my niece and nephew who are hilarious. And it's, just having those excuses to talk about something else instead of it being all consuming.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Again, it's like, there are kids' birthdays. I know from the group chat, there's things going on that we have to also maintain our lives. And like that goes back to the pleasure thing and just, we've got to be mindful that that is not the only thing. I know it's really hard and I appreciate that in this environment, but it's not the only thing that we just talk about. There are other
Yeah.
things going on.
And if I can just ask, again, focusing on the practical tips, you've talked about things like breathing exercises. We talked about exercises to get you out of that emotional state. There's a lot of, when we say breathing exercises, some people might not know what that means or not know how to get started with that. There's a lot of apps out there. Personally, I'm not plugging in any way, but personally, I love Headspace. I use it to help me get to sleep at night. There's a lot of breathing exercises on there, but there's a lot of other ones that, having the guidance to do these exercises instead of just, knowing how to do it yourself. What's your thoughts, Dr. Jane, on apps, websites that you can use that will guide you through these things?
I think they're amazing. I think if you can access these apps and follow these breathing exercises or things before you sleep, I think it's fantastic. I mean, when I'm saying sleep, I mean sleep breathing. It's very much sort of, an inhale for 5, 6, and then exhale for longer. So and you have to repeat that 2 or 3 times to help regulate yourself. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm actually saying a breathing exercise. But, there is so much accessible out there in terms of support. And I think it's very much do what works for you.
I'm going to answer one of our audience members' questions as well and add one of those additional resources, which is Vitis had asked earlier if this series of conversations at Connect for Health was available on YouTube. Yes, Vitas. And for anybody, this conversation and many more about many different health topics, mental health, physical health, uh, if you go to search for Connect for Health on YouTube, you'll find them on Cigna Healthcare's YouTube page. They're also on Mentors, and also these conversations are on the podcast channels as well. So you just search for Connect for Health on Apple Podcasts or indeed Spotify or any other podcast platforms you want to listen to us on. So there's another resource for you because there is lots of practical tools, and I often find with these conversations, I love listening back to them because obviously we're in the moment, we're having these conversations, but it's great to actually then take a step back and go, oh yeah, that was an amazing piece of advice. Wrapping up, we've got about 4 minutes left. If you were to sort of choose your 3 golden rules for people to navigate this, what are your 3 golden rules for yourself that you would share, or the 3 golden rules that you as a clinician share?
That's a good question. 3 golden rules. Just be mindful of your thought process. I think it's so trying to keep yourself calm, trying to keep yourself regulated. So making sure that you don't activate your nervous system. I think the rules for me personally, I don't check the news all the time because I do find it heightens me. So one of my rules, I think, would be just being mindful of what I'm consuming online or on the TV, and communicating with people. So I think being mindful of my expectations on myself and also having support. I think connecting with others, but being mindful of who I'm accessing for support right now is really key. So communication, making sure you're not isolating, normalizing the feelings. Sorry, I don't think that's 3. I think I probably blurred it over there. But it's being kind and compassionate to yourself. This is a new
Mm.
experience for a lot of people. We're in, no one really we're navigating this together. So I think it's just looking out for each other, but making sure that we just approach this and focus on what we can control, I think is key, rather than what we can't in times of uncertainty.
I want to sneak one last question in. Again, this is me just being purely selfish. While we're dealing with all of this stress, and it does heighten stressful conversations, what are our children soaking up? Because we try to be, make them feel safe, but will they be picking up on our stress?
Completely. So
Mm,
kids internalize everything. So actually, if we're very anxious, if we're operating from a high level of stress, then our kids are going to pick up on that, how we respond to things. What are we exposing them to? So we have to focus on keeping ourselves regulated. That's the key thing here. It's actually, that's the number one thing, is manage to keep yourself as regulated as you can. Because I think it also is very dependent on a child's age. So, a very little one might be quite clingy, but if you've got a teenager, I've got a teenager, you know, they have access to these things themselves. So first thing is communicate with them, understand what are they picking up, what do they understand, like validate again how they might be feeling, but question what are you feeling right now? What are you understanding about the situation? So have conversations, but the key thing is how we respond is what they're going to then mirror. So just
Mm.
again, like, keep thinking, I need to regulate myself here, otherwise, actually, I'm going to have a very anxious child. Let's try and protect them as much as possible.
Viewers and listeners, you should also check out our last episode of Connect for Health with the amazing Dr. Khaled Kadri, who was talking about teens and screens, but there was a lot of advice in there around helping them deal with their emotions. Alison, I think the time's almost against us. We're almost out of time. I just wanted to bring you in for some final thoughts about, the advice Dr. Jane's been sharing today.
Firstly, thank you, Scott, for hosting the session. Much appreciate all your insights. And then again, Dr. Jane, I find you extremely useful. For me, understanding an emotion makes me feel calmer about it. So all your advice today I found super helpful. And again, you said at the beginning, a lot of what you're feeling is normal. So I will definitely be taking that as one of my key takeaways for today. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Amazing. A lot of what we're feeling is normal. Thank you very much, Dr. Jane, for joining us today on Connect for Health. As always, Alison as well, amazing co-host. You always bring brilliant insights and questions, and I learn from you every time we co-host together. But of course, also thank you to you, our audience, as always, for tuning in. When the session ends, you will be asked for feedback. We do appreciate it. We believe feedback is a gift. It just helps us make these sessions better and better for you. So from us at Mental and at Cigna Healthcare, Middle East and Africa, stay safe, stay grounded. And yeah, as Dr. Jane said, everything you're feeling is perfectly normal. And we'll see you very soon for another edition of Connect for Health.